Fiancée demanded I pay for her luxury bachelorette trip with her friends, threw a tantrum at our engagement party when I refused. So, I, 27M, have been with Rachel, 26F, for 2 years now. We met through mutual friends who set us up on a blind date, and honestly, we hit it off right away. A few months later, we officially started dating, and about a year ago, we decided to move in together. I work as a software engineer with a solid income, so I contribute more financially to the relationship. Rachel used to work in marketing, but she recently quit her job to enroll in grad school. Her parents are covering her tuition, so that's not a concern, but since we live together, I've had to take on all the household expenses. Right now, the only thing she pays for are groceries and gas, but she mentioned she won't even be able to manage that once school starts. I didn't mind taking on the extra financial load because I love her, and I figured it was temporary. I believed that once she finished school and started working again, we'd go back to splitting everything equally. Plus, I trusted her. It felt like we were building a future together. In fact, I've been planning to propose for a while. Rachel felt like my soulmate, and I was ready to make it official. A week ago, I finally popped the question. She said yes, and for the first few days, everything felt perfect. We started planning an engagement party to celebrate with friends and family. The engagement party was a few days ago, and that's when things took a turn. This was the first time I saw a side of Rachel that I hadn't noticed before, and honestly, I was blindsided. I never thought she could be so materialistic. The party was going great at first. We invited all our closest friends and family, and I was chatting with my parents when Rachel came over and pulled me aside. She looked serious and said she needed to talk to me privately. I followed her into the guest room, expecting an intimate conversation, but instead, I found her entire friend group sitting there. For context, Rachel has a tight-knit group of girlfriends from high school, 6 of them, including her. They're the kind of girls who've known each other forever, but honestly, I never understood how Rachel fit in. Most of them come from wealthy families and have this spoiled, entitled vibe. Rachel's family is comfortable but nowhere near as rich as her friends. I always thought she was different from them, more grounded, but maybe I was wrong. So there I was, standing in front of all of them, already feeling awkward, when Rachel dropped the bomb. She told me that she and the girls had been talking, and they were planning an epic bachelorette trip before the wedding. I relaxed a bit, nothing wrong with that. I told her it sounded great and that I fully supported her having a fun trip with her friends. I even mentioned that I'd probably do something low-key with my guys for my bachelor party. But then came the catch. She smiled and said, "I'm glad you're cool with it, because I was hoping you'd sponsor the whole trip." I blinked, thinking I must have misheard. She went on to explain that they wanted to go somewhere tropical, think private beaches, luxury hotels, and all that for about a week. But since she wasn't working right now, she couldn't afford it. Her parents were already paying for grad school, so she didn't want to burden them with this. So she thought I could cover it, not just for her, but for all 6 of her friends. I was stunned. All her friends were sitting there, staring at me, clearly waiting for my answer. I felt completely ambushed. I quickly did the math in my head, but I didn't really need an extravagant trip for 7 people to an exotic location. That would wipe out a massive chunk of my savings. And for what? A trip I wouldn't even be on? I wasn't trying to be stingy, but I couldn't justify spending that kind of money, especially since Rachel and I were about to get married, and I was already covering all our living expenses. That kind of money could be better used for emergencies, a future house, or, I don't know, the actual wedding. I felt so uncomfortable, but I knew I had to say something. I had to say no. I told Rachel there was no way I could cover the expenses for their trip. Another big reason was that it would probably be a long time before she could pay me back, and I didn't want to complicate things between us, especially not right before we were about to get married. It just felt like a messy, unnecessary situation to get into. As soon as I declined, she and her friends all gave me this weird look, like I had just ruined their lives. One of them asked, "Why can't she go on this trip?" I clarified, telling Rachel that she was absolutely free to go, just not on my dime. If she could figure out another way to pay for it, I had no issue. But I wasn't comfortable fronting that much money for a bachelorette trip. That's when she started doubling down. She said she would pay me back once she got a job after business school. But I explained that it didn't really matter, because until she paid me back, I'd be out a huge amount of money. Plus, she wasn't just asking me to pay for her. It was for all 6 of her friends too. That kind of expense would seriously dent my savings, and I just wasn't willing to do it. I told her flat out that unless she could pay for the trip herself, she'd have to call it off. Feeling awkward with all her friends sitting there, I left the room. I thought that would be the end of it, at least for the night, but I was wrong. She followed me into the living room, still going on about the trip. She was being insanely persistent, saying she just needed me to do this one thing for her, and that it would mean the world. She mentioned how she and her friends had been planning something like this for years, and that she wanted this trip to be special. It was, after all, her big moment, as the first one in their group to get married. I tried to stay calm and told her, "This is supposed to be special for us, too. But if I sponsor this trip for all of you, I might be broke by the time the wedding comes around. and we'll have to get married at a courthouse. That wasn't entirely true. My parents were helping cover some wedding costs, but I didn't mention that. I just wanted her to realize how ridiculous her request was. But she didn't stop. We were arguing in hushed voices, trying to keep it discreet, but I could tell people were starting to notice. We were both getting more agitated, and it was obvious something was off. I finally suggested, let's put this on hold. We can talk about it after the party. That's when she completely lost it. In front of everyone, she started shouting at me. You're so selfish. It's just one trip. You earn enough. You can afford it. But you're too stingy to do anything nice for me. Her voice echoed through the room. Guests stopped talking. The whole place went quiet. She kept going, saying how this trip was something she and her friends had dreamed about for years, and now I was ruining it because I was too self-centered and cheap. At that point, I was fuming. I snapped and yelled back, really? I'm selfish? I've been supporting both of us for the past year while you quit your job and planned for business school. I've been paying all the bills without a word, and now I'm expected to blow thousands on a trip I'm not even invited to? If that makes me selfish, then maybe we shouldn't even be together. I regretted it as soon as the words left my mouth, but it was too late. Rachel burst into tears and ran out of the house. The room was dead silent. Slowly, our guests began leaving. Her parents came over before they left, apologized for her behavior, and told me they'd talk to her. But the damage was already done. I didn't sleep that night. I kept checking my phone, waiting for a call or a text from her. Nothing. It wasn't until the next day that I finally heard something, but not from Rachel. Her parents called me. They asked me to talk to her, to bring her back home. That's when they told me something I didn't know. Apparently, Rachel has always had this weird dynamic with her friends. They're all from wealthy families, and even though she wasn't, she's been trying to fit into that world since high school. Her parents thought she'd eventually grow out of it, that she'd stop trying so hard to be someone she wasn't. But clearly, that hadn't happened. They mentioned this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Rachel would often go along with her friends' over-the-top plans, even when it meant stretching herself too thin. It made me realize that maybe this wasn't just about the trip. It was about deeper insecurities, her feeling like she needed to keep up with her friends, no matter the cost. When Rachel was younger, she always felt the need to prove that her life was just as fabulous as her friends. She wanted to show them that she could keep up, that she could host parties, buy designer clothes, and even fund an all-expenses-paid bachelorette trip if she wanted to. Her parents told me that most of her friends could easily afford a luxury trip like that. Their families had the kind of wealth that made something like a week-long beach vacation a drop in the bucket. But Rachel didn't have that kind of money, and neither did I. Unfortunately, she was too proud to admit that to her friends. Instead, she wanted to pretend that she could afford it, just to fit in. It was something she'd struggled with for years, always trying to match her friends' lavish lifestyles, even when it meant stretching herself too thin. Her parents confessed that this trip fiasco was just another example of that. Except this time, it had gone way too far. Her need to keep up appearances had seriously jeopardized our relationship. They also told me that Rachel wasn't ready to apologize. She was still feeling raw from what happened at the engagement party. But they were worried. She was currently living in a hotel, and it was only a matter of time before she asked them to pay for it. She didn't have the money to stay there indefinitely, and they were hoping I'd step in and get her to come home. They pretty much admitted that they'd been counting on me to take care of her financially while she went to business school. And if we broke up, well, that would throw a wrench into everyone's plans, especially Rachel's. Her parents didn't think it was worth letting something like this ruin our relationship. They told me that Rachel was really upset, not so much about the trip anymore, but about what I'd said at the party. Apparently, she was devastated that I'd told her I didn't want to be with her anymore, and worse, that I'd said it so quickly and without thinking. She felt like I'd just thrown away our entire relationship in the heat of the moment, and then I didn't even try to follow her or reach out afterward. And yeah, she's right about that. But here's the thing, I was waiting for her to reach out. She was the one who started the fight, the one who lost her temper first. I felt like it was on her to come and clear the air, not me. I mean, the fight was kind of her fault, right? Asking me to sponsor a luxury trip for her and all her friends, while I was already covering all our household expenses, was a lot. It felt entitled. I was willing to support her while she went to school, but I wasn't about to give in to every whim just because she wanted something. I have my own life, my own financial goals. Unlike her, I'm not comfortable asking my parents for money, and I don't want to rely on anyone else to fund my lifestyle. I have to look out for myself. That said, I still care about her. Despite everything, Rachel has been an amazing partner in so many ways, and I do want to make this work. But I'm also stuck wondering, was I wrong for what I said? AITA for telling my fiancée I didn't want to be with her anymore after she threw a tantrum at our engagement party? Update 1. I decided to talk to Rachel, not to apologize or get back together right away, but because I needed clarity. I wanted to understand where we stood and what was going to happen moving forward. A lot of you in the comments told me to run, to end things completely, because what I witnessed at the engagement party was a massive red flag. And I get it, it was a red flag. But I also feel like I can't just walk away from this relationship without at least having one honest conversation. I need to know what really happened and why things spiraled the way they did. So, I'm going to meet up with her. Not sure how it'll go, but I'll keep you all posted. So, at least now I'll be able to figure out whether we can fix this or if it's time to let go. I really appreciate everyone who shared advice in the comments. But at the end of the day, no one knows our relationship better than we do. And my gut tells me I need to talk to Rachel, face to face, before making any decisions. This morning, I sent her a text. It's been about a week since she left, and her parents have been texting me nonstop, trying to convince me to reach out and patch things up. Rachel, though, she hasn't replied to anything until now. Her parents told me which hotel she was staying at in case I wanted to go see her in person. I'll admit, I considered it. It could have been one of those big, romantic gestures you see in movies, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized it might just come across as invasive, especially if she was still mad. I didn't want to risk making things worse, so I stuck to texting. I sent her the classic, "We need to talk." And I'm sure she immediately knew this wasn't going to be a fun conversation. Like most couples, Rachel and I have had our share of fights before, but nothing like this. Our disagreements usually ended within a day or two. We'd cool off, apologize, and move on. But this time, it was different. This was the first time one of us had actually packed up and left, and for over a week, no contact. I won't lie, I've been a nervous wreck. I kept wondering if she'd just decide to end things completely, or if we'd find some way to fix what happened. Despite everything, I still love her. She's been the best partner I've had, and I wasn't ready to let that go without at least trying. Update 2. So, Rachel finally replied. I didn't know what to expect, but her text actually caught me off guard, in a good way. She said she wanted to make things work. But here's the kicker. She read my original post here, along with the comments, and she didn't like what she saw. Not because of what I said, but because of how she came across in the post. She said reading it made her realize how bad things had gotten, and she fully took responsibility for her actions at the engagement party. I didn't think she'd own up to it, but it felt like a genuine apology, at least over text. She also mentioned that she didn't want to hash everything out over the phone or through messages. She thought it'd be better if we met in person to talk it through properly. So, we're meeting for lunch tomorrow. She even offered to drive down to my office so we could go somewhere nearby, knowing I'd have to get back to work afterward. That little gesture meant a lot, like maybe she really is thinking about things differently now. But, to be honest, I'm still not sure what's going to happen. Her text sounded serious, but not overly warm. I can't tell if she wants to fix things, or if she's just looking for closure. What's also got me worried is that her parents have stopped reaching out entirely. They've been pushing me to fix things, but now? Radio silence. It feels like they've either given up or decided it's better if we don't get back together. Either way, I know this meeting is important. Even if we end up breaking up, I'd rather we have one last proper conversation instead of letting that awful fight at the party be the last time we ever spoke. I think we owe it to each other. Most of you in the comments said I should walk away, that what happened at the party was a giant red flag. And yeah, I get that. It was humiliating and ridiculous. But deep down, I'm still holding on to the idea that we could make this work. I know how she gets when she's influenced by her friends, the same group that's been leading her down this path for years. Without them in the picture, Rachel is thoughtful, kind, and the woman I fell in love with. Maybe I'm being naive. Or maybe, there's still something worth saving. I guess I'll find out tomorrow. Rachel's a really good person. It's just that she spent too much time trying to fit in with the wrong crowd. That pressure to keep up with her friends is what pushed her to act out the way she did. Honestly, I don't think she would have screamed at me like that at the engagement party if her friends hadn't been hyping her up with those ridiculous ideas instead of encouraging her to do the right thing. But, at the same time, I know it was her choice to listen to them. It was her decision not to think things through on her own. Even after everything that happened, I wanted to make it work. I thought we could try couples counseling if necessary, and actually put in the effort to fix things instead of giving up. I don't really believe in walking away from relationships without trying, and while I'm not sure if that's a good or bad thing, I really did want us to find a way back. Update 3. We met today, and it's over. I don't know what I was expecting, or why I thought it would go any differently, but I was clearly fooling myself thinking we could fix this and stay together. She gave me the engagement ring back. She told me she'd come by in a couple of days to grab her stuff. And by stuff, I mean pretty much everything. She left almost all of her belongings behind when she stormed out after the engagement party. I didn't ask where she was planning to stay now. I'm sure she has friends or family who'll help her out. But honestly, that didn't make it any easier. It sucks knowing that we're really over, that I'm not going to wake up and see her next to me anymore. This was by far the most meaningful relationship I've ever had, and now it's just done. The conversation was rough. She told me she read my first post here, but didn't read the updates. She said the original post was hard enough to get through. Seeing everything I felt written out so clearly made her face some harsh realities about herself. She admitted that it opened her eyes and forced her to accept some difficult truths. Mainly, that she'd been floating through life without much direction, relying on me, her parents, and her friends to support her, without really taking charge of her own path. She said she didn't want to keep living like that. She wanted to figure out who she was and make something of herself before leaning on anyone else again. She also thanked me for everything I'd done for her, for supporting her, and for being willing to go above and beyond for the relationship. It felt weird hearing her say that, like we were closing a chapter. I didn't know how to respond, so I just smiled. Looking back, I probably should have said more. There was one thing that really surprised me, though. Remember how I thought her friends were these shallow, entitled people who were pushing her to make all the wrong choices? Turns out, I was wrong. After the engagement party, they were the ones who told her she needed to apologize. They told her she was completely out of line and that if she really wanted to fix things with me, she had to own up to her mistakes. They even talked about the financial disparity between her and the rest of them, how they understood that she wasn't from the same kind of wealth and that she didn't need to keep pretending. Apparently, they'd even offered to help cover costs for things in the past, but Rachel's pride got in the way. Hearing that, I felt bad for misjudging them. They weren't the villains I made them out to be. They were actually trying to look out for her. In the end, Rachel and I broke up, but at least we parted on good terms. We hugged before she left. I managed to hold it together until I got back to the office, but then I had to excuse myself and head to the restroom. I just needed a minute to process it all and let it out. I don't know if we'll ever get back together. A part of me still hopes we might, if we both grow and figure things out. But for now, it's over, and I just have to live with that.